So many Pokemon designs get absolutely rinsed for not being creative, and the majority of these are due to them being based on inanimate objects. I mean, this is literally just my house keys. Now personally, I don't mind this type of design. I mean, this chandelier is goated. But I thought it would be funny to try and beat a game using only inanimate Pokemon, and on what better game to do it than on Kanto Reborn, also known as Unova. This will not be a hardcore Nuzlocke. I need a break, seriously, especially with the upcoming video. All of the available starters are stupidly based on animals, so with a little bit of Nintendo magic, we can grab our starter, fittingly name it, and the run begins. And then obviously we saw all of the early game story business, sort the situation at the ranch, and I immediately head straight to the gym. Now, this is my first time playing challenge mode, so I can get my ice cream all the way to the level cap and head straight on in. He leads with Patra and I with, well, who else but ice cream? An icicle spear falls just short of the KO, so he potions on up, but we can KO the next turn. His dog comes out next and sets up a workup, and our icicle spear brings it below half before Berry. A tackle does huge damage to us as an icy wind brings it low and lowers their speed. We can then outspeed and KO with another icicle spear, and this brings out his final mon, Pidove. And I think we have this in the bag, but he then gets off a crit quick attack and we wipe. Now it's kind of embarrassing to have our first against the first gym, but anyway, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, and that is exactly what I do. Our icicle spear hits 5 times, instantly KOing the rat, and this brings out his ace Lillipup yet again. They set up first turn, and I go for an icy wind for about a quarter, but now we outspeed an icicle spear only brings it to half after berry recovery. Their tackle does over half, and we thankfully hit 3 times, KOing the puppy, and this brings out his final mon, that darn bird, yet again, but we can just outspeed an Oko with an icy wind, claiming the first gym badge. Now that we can finally progress, we immediately head straight to the next city on our roadmap, and once we are there we head straight to the Verbat complex to pick up our next encounter. This is just a magnet. It's a phenomenal Pokemon, but it's just a magnet. And with this elite team there is no way we can fumble again, right? Roxy, the poison leader, is up, and she leads with Coughing and I with Magnemite. I simply thought Steel is just immune to poison, so we will win. Thundershock does about a third, and Tackle does little, so a couple turns later we can KO, bringing out Grimer. I paralyse it first turn with a Thunder Wave, and then see it has 4 times super effective Mud Slap. It doesn't do too much, but it does lower our accuracy, but thankfully we managed to bring it low, and a Magnet Bomb doesn't KO, so they potion up. And then our Magnet Bomb gets a critical hit, perfect timing. I fire off another, leaving it in the red, but they KO our Magnet with some more mud. Our Ice Cream is now out, and we can outspeed and finish it off, bringing out her ace Whirlipede. A Venoshock does a third, and an Icy Wind does little but lowers their speed, meaning we now outspeed. We bring it to just about half as they bring us low with another. We then miss our next as we are brought super low, and we don't get a crit, and we activate their berry, so we fall the next turn. It is kind of embarrassing, but I'm just getting into the swing of the run. I promise it gets better. Please don't click off the video. I re-challenge straight away, and this time leads with our Ice type, not our Steel type. We get hit by a Venoshock, but our Avalanche does big damage, bringing them to half before Berry. Foolishly, I do the same thing again, leaving it deep in the red, meaning she heals in the next turn, and I fire off an Icy Wind. And now we outspeed, I go for another, bringing it back below half, and before we fall to a Venoshock. Now, as I bring in Magnemite, it does seem like we are in a worse position than before, but thankfully we can just outspeed and finish off the Coughing with a Thundershock. Grimer comes out and I immediately paralyse, and they go for a Disable. We eventually take it down to only taking 2 mud slaps in the process, but I don't think half health is enough. The Ace Whirlipede is out and it goes for a rollout, which does little, but that is super scary, especially because we miss our Thunder Wave. Their second brings us below half, but we do paralyse. I have to go for Magnet Bomb for the accuracy, which does little, and their rollout brings us low. And I've got no other option but to just hope that we do get a crit Magnet Bomb. And we do, and it brings them below half before Berry, and they get fully paralysed, stopping the rollout. And they continue to be paralysed, and our Magnet Bomb can just chip away and get the KO and the badge. Not the prettiest, but I'm not complaining. Unfortunately, we do still have to sit through the PokeStar Studios. Should I do a video 100% in it? I think it would be hell. But anyway, once the nightmare is over, we can hop on a boat to the Big Apple, and this is where the game truly opens up for us. Down in the sewers, after we deal with Team Plasma in the double battle with Hugh, we can get some major upgrades for the team. We can find Grimer, the sentient pile of goo, in the sewers, and Rock'n'Roller, the sentient stone in Relic Passage, and finally Trubbish, the sentient trash, en route 4. And with those upgrades, the team is looking capable, and it's time to test our new members against the third gym, the bug specialist leader, Berg. I lead with Trubbish, and honestly, this is where I realise how broken this strategy is. I get 3 stockpiles off, and I stay healthy due to the held leftovers. And then we can just fire off acid sprays for the KO. Carablast comes out, and now we have a boosted defense and they are poisoned. We can fire off even more acid sprays, each one getting more powerful due to the defense drop, and we get the KO. His Ace Livani is out now, and they miss a grass whistle as we fire off an acid spray for about a quarter. They miss another, and we bring it deep into the red before they bury. They do finally connect, and we get put to sleep, and then Poison brings it into potion range. But we wake up, and an acid spray does massive damage, but Poison falls just short of the KO. But the next turn they just put us to sleep, so the Poison can just take it out. Oh, and our leftovers bring us back up to full HP, so when his last mon Shelmet comes out, I can stay in as they get poisoned, and eventually we take it down thanks to the poison chip. Stockpile toxic spikes. If you don't like that strategy, I suggest you avert your eyes. It's going to get messy. And the next roadblock is the steel type Team Plasma sympathizer Colress, and this is very scary for our team on the face of it, especially when he paralyses our Magnemite first turn. But thankfully we can just whittle it down and break through for the Sonic Boom KO while managing to stay relatively healthy. Clink is his next mon, and I am jealous of its inanimate prowess, but we eventually get super lucky with paralysis, and Magnemite can pick up the KO with little to no trouble at all. We are snowballing right now, and hopefully we can keep the momentum against the 4th leader, the electric specialist Elisa. We have some great powerhouses for this stage of the game, but some that could definitely use an upgrade. I'm looking at you, Ice Cream Cone. I lead with our trash, and she sends out Emolga. They immediately Volt Switch, which does massive damage into Flaffy as I use Toxic Spikes. I go for a stockpile next turn as a Volt Switch again into Emolga, and another Volt Switch from the Pika clone KOs our trash bag. Flaffy comes out and gets poisoned, which I guess is a silver lining, but we send out our other poison type, and she goes for a Volt Switch again, which does almost half. I went for Mud Bomb, so Emolga is immune. They actually go for a move that isn't Volt Switch, and an Aerial Ace does massive damage, but our Sludge Bomb gets a crit, which brings it low before Berry. I switch Grimer out into Boldor as they Volt Switch into Joltik, and an Energy Ball then just KOs our Rock. She is reading me like a damn book. I bring our starter out and they Volt Switch into Zeb Striker on an Icy Wind. We still don't outspeed the Zebra, and a Flame Charge absolutely destroys our Ice type. Grimer comes back out, and this is a sacrifice as it just falls, and poison damage brings the Zebra into berry range. Magneton is out and they go for a pursuit, which gives me hope, but no, I forgot it has the ability Motor Drive and I went for Thunder Shock. Another pursuit does little and Sonic Boom brings it below half, and the next turn another with poison damage can take it out. A very healthy Flaffy is out and paralyses us. I swear electric types can't get paralysed, but this is just my luck. We then get confused the next turn and hit ourselves. After poison brings it below half, they Volt Switch into Joltik as we hurt ourselves again. An energy ball from the spider crits, but we finally hit through and just do little. And then she Hyper Potions. Oh, and then we hit ourselves. What an unfortunate turn of events. We then fall to a Volt Switch after, and I feel violated. After some actual planning, I attempt to battle the model again, and it begins the same way. Emolga Volt Switches into Flaffy, and I set up Toxic Spikes. I get off a stockpile as they paralyse with Thunder Wave. They Volt Switch again back into Emolga as we are fully paralysed. And you guessed it, they Volt Switch again into Flaffy as they get poisoned, and an Acid Spray does little, and the drop doesn't matter because they Volt Switch out and KO the next turn. As Emolga comes back out, I bring out Vanillite, but they switch again into her Ace. We get an Icy Wind off, which lowers their speed, and expecting the Flame Charge, I switch into Boldor, who tanks it well. They then switch into Joltik, which does massive damage, and we miss our Rock Slide. I bring Grimer out on an energy ball that does little, and guess what happens next? They Volt Switch into Flaffy. We can fire off a Sludge Bomb that brings it below half. She then Hyper Potions, and we can fire off another for more damage. They then Volt Switch, bringing Guslow and switching into Joltik. She then Volt Switches again into Flaffy and KOs Grimer, but we are chipping away at her party with the thanks to Toxic Spikes. I bring out Boldor as a sacrifice, but they Volt Switch into Joltik, who almost falls to poison damage. So I bring out our starter as they Volt Switch again into her Ace on an Icy Wind, bringing it below half before Berry. I stay in on the pursuit and we go down, but poison brings it below half. Magneton can then come out, and 2 turns later we can KO, staying nice and healthy thanks to leftovers. Flaffy then falls 2 turns later thanks to poison, despite paralysing and confusing. Leftovers have brought us up to full as she brings out her super weak Joltik, and it doesn't matter that we miss our Sonic Boom as they fall to poison damage, and this brings out her final Mon, her annoyingly healthy Emolga. But thankfully we can wall this, and thanks to leftovers we can stay healthy and eventually take it down, finally defeating Elisa and claiming that 4th badge. Man, Volt Switch is annoying as Anyway, moving on from that struggle, we are finally at the stage where we can get some proper upgrades on this squad, and these come in the form of a cog and an Easter Island Compass hybrid. And with the addition of these two, I do notice that most of our encounters will be Steel or Poison type, which is definitely going to cause some problems further down the line. But the upgrades don't stop there, because while we are in the cave, we can evolve the new addition Nose Pass into the Mustache Man that is Probopass, but not only that, we can also evolve our Magneton into the beastly Magnezone. But those upgrades don't really help us right now, as it is time to face the ground type leader Clay, and he is always a difficult battle. He leads with Crocorock, and Stank doesn't care about the Intimidate, and we set up Toxic Spikes. Bulldoze doesn't even do half. The next turn they set up Sandstorm as we Toxic the Crocodile. We then get Tormented as we set up Stockpile. They then get a Crit Crunch which leaves us on 2 HP, but we fall to Sandstorm. I bring in our starter as we get hit by a crunch to almost half, but we can KO from that range. Onyx comes out next, and this thing is deceptively quick, and with that Sandstorm for Death boost, I can't do much, so I switch into Magnezone on a soft rock slide as the Sandstorm leaves. A Mirror Shot gets the straight KO from that range as he brings out Sand Slash. I can't switch anything in, so I have to just fire off a Mirror Shot that does over half, but we get smashed by a 4-time super effective Bulldoze for the Oko. Thankfully, our starter can come back out and get the KO, but this brings out his Ace Excadrill, and this thing is insane. It's fast and it hits like a truck, and that's exactly what it does. It outspeeds and finishes off the Ice Cream. The then our new gear, and our rock takes one and fires off a few mud slaps as they keep missing but can't keep it up, so it falls, and finally Probopass just gets outsped and O-code for our 4th wipe. Again, I believe my mistake there was not planning accordingly, so after actually thinking of a strategy, I attempt it again, and again it starts the same trash versus croc. We toxic first turn as they set up Sandstorm, and then we get off a layer of toxic spikes. They then go for Bulldoze, which does almost half, and then they go for Torment. This time they do not get to crit on their crunch, and an acid spray does little, but poison brings them below half before bury. We survive another crunch, and poison brings it into potion range as we go for a second acid spray. They then have to set up another Sandstorm, but they fall at the end of the turn to poison. The rock snake comes out and an acid spray does pitiful damage as they go for a rock polish to boost their speed. Thanks to the stock bars I have set up, a rock slide does little but does flinch. Another one brings us into the red, and the next turn we fall to a bulldoze as poison brings it to half. I bring out Probopass, and after taking a rock slide, a power gem can KO from that range. Sandslash is out again and it goes for Home Claws, which is super scary, and a power gem does little, and then we just get KO'd by a bulldoze. Thankfully they are low enough that Magnezone can KO from that range, and this brings out his final Mon, Excadrill. We immediately get flinched by a rock slide which pops our air balloon. Wonderful. We then get smashed by a bulldoze for the KO, and this brings out Boldor for my ultimate strategy. Yeah, basically I just fire off mud slaps for the KO. Like, a lot of them. Their accuracy gets as low as it can go, and they do hit through, but we come out on top. Am I proud? Yeah, screw that guy. And now that gym battle's over, the level cap has increased, and I think it is time to evolve our Boldor into one of the coolest looking Pokemon ever, Gigalith. Oh, and side note, our gear turns into a bigger gear, but like, no one really cares at this point. And the reason no one cares is because we can get arguably the greatest encounter, if not the best Pokemon in this game. Up in Celestial Tower we can get a candle. It doesn't sound like much, it certainly doesn't look like much, but if you see my previous Alola run, shameless plug, you'll know that Chandelure is a beast. But we don't need to use our new team member against the flying type gym. Thankfully, this is a simpler one. I leave with Gigalith, who can set up stealth rocks, and Swoobat does big damage with an energy ball. But I can take another, so I stay in and KO with a rock slide. Swannet comes out and I bring in Magnezone on an air slash that misses, and then we can OHKO with a Thundershock. Sigilith falls to a few more, and Skarmory doesn't fare much better. That battle was a nice change of pace. And now we get to catch a flight to the east side of the map, where we can get yet another team member. And that team member just happens to be the hot air balloon Drifblim. Now honestly, the greatest contribution this Pokemon will ever have to the run is that it can learn Fly, but hey, it's better than nothing. And just as we head north from Undella town, our rival stops us for a battle, and I like this game. It doesn't force rival battles down the throat every 5 minutes. That being said, this is a walk in the park as he only has 3 Pokemon. 3. And we're about to take on the 7th gym. It is actually laughable. Unpheasant just gets shocked by Magnezone. Lampent handles the Emboar with ease, and his Water Monkey gets smashed by our trash. I'm starting to like these objects. And just before we take on the next gym at level 47, our starter, our little ice cream, evolves into a bigger ice cream, but this one has a flake. But this Mr. Whippet is crucial to victory against the dragon type leader Drayden. We of course poison and set up toxic spikes before falling to his Druddigon, but this means we can safely bring in our ice cream and go in. We can finish Druddigon with an Ice Beam. Altaria is quad weak to ice, so another OHKOs. Flygon is also 4 times weak to it, so we can also one-shot after taking a rock slide. His ace Haxorus is out, and after a weak Shadow Claw does little, we can OHKO. I'm not sure why I even set up the Toxic Spice, but it's always nice when it's nice and simple. And as we head out of the gym, some eco-terrorists freeze the entire city, and I get told that it's not a big deal and I should just continue with the gym challenge. Well, who am I to question 2 gym leaders? So yeah, I just bounce. On the way there, I decided it's the perfect time to evolve our lamp into a chandelier. Not that the fire type will feature much against the 8th and final gym, who just happens to be a water specialist, but our tried and tested Stratty does not care if you're a water type. We can poison the whale and thankfully tank an earthquake before setting up toxic spikes and falling to another. We can bring in our Magnet and KO from that range with a discharge. His turtle is next, and this can be scary, but thankfully a discharge can leave it on 1 HP thanks to Sturdy, but it only goes for a Scald. Its berry heals it up, so poison doesn't KO, and he heals up the next turn, but we can KO it thanks to the poison damage chip. Mantine gets absolutely destroyed by a 4 times super effective discharge, and this brings out his ace Jellicent. It survives a discharge before berry recovery brings it above half, and a Scald finally brings us below half. But as we outspeed, we can finish it off the next turn, beating Marlon and claiming the 8th and final badge. We then storm the plasma boat, yada yada yada, story stuff, easy grunt battles, I'm not going to bore you. Well, it's easy until it comes to Chorus, and this is a potential slip-up battle. I lead Gigalith against his Magneton, and we get paralysed and are fully paralysed. Brilliant first turn. They Volt Switch into Metang as we are fully paralysed again. We then avoid a Meteor Mash and get off a Bulldoze that does massive damage, but the next turn they connect, bringing us low as we are paralysed yet again. We survive another on 2 HP and get off another Bulldoze for the KO. Magneton comes back out and Volt Switches for the KO, bringing out Beheeyem. I bring out our Chandelier and a Shadow Ball of straight OHKOs. His own gear is out and goes for a shift gear, but our Candle doesn't care as a Flame Burst OHKOs. Magnezone is out and the Flame Burst brings it down to Sturdy and they paralyse us. He then heals with a full restore, but we bring him back to 1 HP. He then outspeeds and a discharge does about half as we are fully paralysed. Another leaves us on 7 HP and we are paralysed again, so our Ghost type falls the next turn. I decide to bring in our Magnezone for a Magnet Showdown and we outspeed and finish it off, and this brings out Magnezone's younger sibling. Discharge does little and they paralyse, and the next turn they fire off a Flash Cannon for little. This takes a while thanks to their Eviolite and Paralysis, but we eventually take it down, defeating the evil scientist. But the plasma segment is far from over. I mean, Getsis literally tries to off us using the legendary dragon, but his son N saves us. Honestly, the Innova storyline is goated in both versions. Anyway, it was all part of Getsis' master plan as he combines the dragons to create a Mega Dragon, which I completely forgot we have to battle. I don't want to get swept by this, so I just poison it to guarantee the victory, but I don't think it was necessary as Probopass can destroy the legendary using its mustache power. And then we immediately have to battle Getsis, but his son thankfully heals us before this battle, and this battle is insane. Getsis has one of the most difficult parties you can face, and he leads with Cofagrigus. Knowing he likes to protect first turn, I set up Toxic Spikes, and the next turn I poison it as it hits us with a massive Psychic. I then switch into Chandelier on another Psychic, which does little, and the next turn we can KO with a Shadow Ball. He brings out his Seismitoad and I switch into our Ice Cream on an Earthquake, and the next turn we can fire off an Ice Beam, which brings it below half. We then tank a Drain Punch deep in the red, and thankfully we can outspeed it and finish it off with another Ice Beam. Electros comes out next, and this is such a cool Pokemon, but it can be tough to take down, so I switch into Gigalith on an Acrobatics, and after tanking a Thunderbolt above half, a Rock Slide can do big damage. We get bought low, but we can KO with another Rock Slide, and this brings out his Drapion, who just outspeeds, but we survive an Earthquake on 2 HP and fire off a Bulldoze for massive damage. But the next turn we are still slower, so we fall to an X-Scissor. I bring out Chandelure and a Flame Burst can pick up the KO. His Toxic Croak is out, and expecting the Sucker Punch, I go for a Will-O-Wisp, which misses, but they go for a Shadow Ball, which does massive damage. They read me like a book again, but this time we connect before falling to another Shadow Ball. I switch in Probopass on a Brick Break, but it does almost half before we fire off a huge Earth Power, which brings it into the red with Burn Chip. The next turn he uses a full restore, and another Earth Power brings it below half. A second Brick Break then KOs our Mon, and I bring in out Ice Cream, expecting them to do anything but Sucker Punch, as they haven't done it at all yet. But of course, this time they do, and our Ice Cream falls. I then bring out Garbodor and aim to set up some stockpiles and Acid Sprays to whittle it down, but we just get smashed by a crit Shadow Ball, which is wonderful. Thankfully, Magnezone can come in, and after a Brick Break, KO with Discharge. Hydreigon, the pseudo-legendary, and his ace is his final Mon, and it goes for a Dragon Rush, which we resist, but it flinches. It misses its second, and our Flash Cannon does just over half, and it all comes down to this next turn. They fire off a Dragon Rush, which connects, but we survive on 4 HP and can fire off a Flash Cannon, which gets the KO, defeating Getsis and Team Plasma for good. And with that stress out of the way, we can take a lovely walk through an amazing, arguably the best badge gate in the series, and then we head all the way through Victory Road before we face down against our rival for the final time. He leads with Unpheasant and I with our Big Rock, and they immediately U-turn into Buffalont, and our Rock Slide does just under half. We can tank an Earthquake before almost KOing with another Rock Slide, and the next turn he uses a Potion and I decide to set up Stealth Rocks. After taking another, I go for a Bulldoze, which does little but lowers their speed, and a Rock Slide brings it below half and flinches. The next turn we fire off another that for some reason doesn't KO but does get the flinch, so we can finally take it out the next turn. He brings out his Water Monkey and I switch into my Trash Bag on a Surf that does way too much damage. Thankfully we outspeed and poison just before we fall to another. Chandelure can come in and get the KO from that range, and his starter is out, and we almost OHKO, leaving it deep in the yellow before falling to a crit Rock Slide. So I decide to bring out our starter for the showdown, and we can pick up the KO from that range. His Burb comes back out, but as we used Uproar we are locked in, but we don't mind as we can take it down in 2, defeating Hugh and finally reaching the Pokémon League. And once the team are all trained up, I head on inside and I decide to take them on from left to right for no other reason than I am scared to face Marshall. So first up is the Ghost Specialist Chantal, and she leads with Cofagrigus and I with our Trash. We trade statuses first turn, and the next turn I obviously get Spikes up before she fires off a Psychic for well over half. I switch Chandelure in on an expected Psychic, but they go for a Shadow Ball which almost KOs. Thankfully we can outspeed and pick up the KO from that range with our own Shadow Ball. Golurt comes out, and this is yet another awesome Mon, but not awesome enough to survive a Shadow Ball as it gets OHKO'd. Drifloon is out next, and this is so bulky, but even it cannot survive, and Chandelure picks up another OHKO. Burnett is her penultimate Mon, and it finally gets us with Sucker Punch, so I bring Gigalith in, who unfortunately gets burned, so our Rock Slide doesn't even do half, but the next turn we can get the KO with a crit. Her final Mon is her own Chandelure, and we know how insane this thing is, especially when it KOs Gigalith with an Energy Ball. So I bring out Probopass as they are scarved into Energy Ball, which does little, and then we can pick up the KO. Grimsley is up next, and his Dark types are so cool. God, Unova's dex is insane. Anyway, he leads with Liepard and I with Good Old Faithful, and hey, if it ain't broke. After a fake out, we poison and get Toxic Spikes up, but like clockwork, fall to a crit Night Slash. I bring out our Magnet and we can pick up the KO with a Thunderbolt, which brings out his Croc, who smashes us with a 4-time stab earthquake. This does mean that we can get our ice cream in safely and KO with an ice beam. Scrafty comes out and an ice beam does about a quarter, but they go for Rock Tomb, which does a little. I switch into our candle on a brick break and a flamethrower can KO from that range. Absol comes out next and we can OHKO with a flamethrower. This Pokemon is not real, it's insane. His final mon is Bisharp and it moves first due to Quick Claw, and we survive the Night Slash and can respond with a flamethrower for the OHKO. The Psychic Specialist Caitlyn is our next opponent and her Psychic types can be scary. I poison her Musharna first and it puts us to sleep, and the next turn a Dream Eater straight OHKOs us. I bring Gigalith out and go for Bulldoze, but we already outspeed and they put us to sleep. A Dream Eater does over half and we stay asleep, so we just get KO'd. That's 2 Pokemon we have lost to Musharna. That is actually embarrassing. I bring out Chandelure, who picks up the KO with a Shadow Ball. Sigilyph then comes out and fires off a Shadow Ball that does big damage and brings us below half, but ours does more and gets the OHKO. Gothitelle is out next and our Chandelure isn't playing games and just gets another OHKO. Her next one is a Metagross. God, Challenge Mode isn't playing around, but even that cannot survive a flamethrower and gets one shot, and that brings out her final one, Reuniclus, but Chandelure doesn't care. It's just too powerful and gets another OHKO. But now it is time to face the scary one, Marshall, the fighting specialist. And if you haven't noticed, our team is hella weak to fighting. He leads with Throw, and of course we poison before taking a Bulldoze. We start outspeed, so we get spikes up and fall the next turn. I decide now is the time for Chandelure, who I've taught Psychic to, and we can KO Throw. Conkeldurr comes out and it somehow survives deep in the red and fires off a Guts boosted Stone Edge, which absolutely obliterates our fire type, but thankfully they do fall to poison damage. I bring in our Magnet and he brings out Sork. They outspeed and a Brick Break does massive damage, but unfortunately our Thunderbolt and poison damage is not enough for the KO. This means the next turn he full restores, curing the poison, but we get the paralysis on our Thunderbolt so we can outspeed and finish it off the next turn. This brings out Mienshao, who finishes us off with a high jump kick. I bring out Probopass, but they connect with a high jump kick and OHKO. I bring out our starter and they connect again and OHKO our Ice Cream. Our final mon is our Rock type, and our high jump kick brings us to Sturdy and we fire off a Bulldoze. They go for a bounce, which we survive, but it does paralyze us. We finish it off, but just to kick us while we're down, his final mon is a Lucario, who of course outspeeds and KOs our Dreams with an Aura Sphere. And in true fashion, I immediately challenge him again without changing a thing. You know, I've got to stay on brand. The start is exactly the same. We poison Throw and get spikes up, and then I let our trash fall. I bring out our Magnet, who almost KOs with a Thunderbolt, but thankfully survives a Bulldoze. Knowing he will heal, I stay in and fire off another Thunderbolt, which does under half but paralyzes. I hope for a high roll, but don't get it, and we fall, leaving it in the red. Probopass can come in and outspeed and get the KO, bringing out Mienshao, and knowing it will high jump kick, I switch into our Ghost type so it crashes. I switch again back into Probopass as they use Bounce, which does little, and a Thunderbolt KOs. His Ace Conkeldurr is out now and it goes for a Bulk Up, which is super scary. But I Volt Switch and go into Chandelure, who can outspeed and KO from that range with Psychic. Lucario is out next and we can outspeed, and the Flamethrower does get the OHKO, leaving his final mon, Sork. But Chandelure is too good and the Psychic leaves it on 1 thanks to Sturdy, and Poison can take it down. It's crazy how much easier that was when I just used my brain. I take down the rest of the Elite Four exactly the same way as before, and it means that it is now time to face down against the champion Iris, who leads with Hydreigon. Her team is insane, but I'm sure ours can do it. We poison as a Dragon Pulse immediately crits and OHKOs. Okay, so no toxic spikes, it's time to improvise. We bring our Ice Cream in and we avoid a Fire Blast, and thankfully Poison can pick up the KO after our Ice Beam falls short. Aggron is out next and I switch into Probopass as they go for an Earthquake, which OHKOs. This is not looking good. Thankfully Chandelure can OHKO with Flamethrower and this brings out Lapras, so of course I switch into Magnezone, who avoids a Sing on the switch, fires off a Thunderbolt which leaves it deep in the red. She full restores, but we get a high roll and can OHKO. Haxorus is the next one out and I switch into Vanillux on an Earthquake and then back into Magnezone on an Outrage, which does little. They get confused after hitting us again and a Flash Cannon does half. They then hurt themselves in confusion and we can pick up the KO with another Flash Cannon. As Juddigan comes out, I Volt Switch into our Ice Cream as they miss a Focus Blast, so we can outspeed an OHKO with an Ice Beam. Archeops is her final mon and we outspeed, and poetically, our starter, the Ice Cream, can OHKO, defeating the champion Iris and beating Pokémon Black 2 with only inanimate Pokémon. This run was so fun. Honestly, I got to use some of the best Pokemon like Magnezone and Chandelure. Hell, even Garbodor and Vanillux surprised me. Whether you like the designs or not, the Pokemon are good. And my first run on Challenge Road was fun and super challenging. I thank every single one of you for watching, and if you enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe for more wacky Pokemon challenges. And if you have anything to add or a run to suggest, let me know down below. And with all that said, stay classy and have a wonderful, wonderful day.